the ketamine is not going to solve your problems, but it's going to make you solving your problems more possible. And the example that I often give is my own experience of stopping drinking alcohol after working with psychedelics. The psychedelics did not go into the bar and make sure that I didn't drink. They did not, a year after I wasn't drinking, keep me from going into bars. But what they did was they gave me an imprint that was so visceral and so embodied and so potent that after 2 years of trying to get away from alcohol, I was able to do it after just 1 weekend working with psychedelics. Welcome back to me recording this episode for the 4th, maybe 5th time. Mercury retrograde, Lionsgate portal. There's so much happening right now, and I'm not at all surprised that I have to do this over and over again. And if astrology is not your thing, totally get it. Or if astrology is like you're astrology curious, or even if you're like astrology know-how, go to episode 39. That's the episode where Danielle Mercurio and I discuss how astrology can be a really powerful insight tool for your integration process and things like that. And I really love astrology to be like an informant of what's happening. So when I recorded this episode the first time and something happened, I thought, okay, that's fine. Edgar Allan Poe lost all of his best poetry, and then he rewrote that poetry, and he became a star, right? Like a whatever. You're going to be a star, kid. He became really famous for his poetry, but not the poetry that was lost, the poetry that was written after. So every time something happens in the podcast, I always think, okay, well, that was my practice round. So, and this episode, God bless this episode. This episode has been re-recorded so many times because of tech blips. And Mercury is the ruling planet of technology and communication. It's my ruling planet because I have so much in Gemini. And I'm not mad. I'm just amused. And I hope you're amused too, because this intro that you're hearing right now is going to be the intro to the episode. So the first 10 minutes of the episode lost in the ether. And then there was another tech blip that the editor was able to make it work. Also, shout out to Arvin, our editing editor, like our main editor for all of this. Like, he does magic with these podcast episodes. And I just really want to shout him out because he's just such a beautiful soul, and he does such great work with these episodes. And he was like, okay, I can make that work, but literally there's no sound. Go re-record the intro. And I was like, all right. So here I am just a couple of days before this episode releases, just being raw and honest. What a labor of love this whole project is, and also what's going on behind the scenes. So if you're watching this on YouTube, it'll be much easier and more obvious because I didn't even try to pretend like I'm going to wear the same thing that I wore in the original recording. So where do we begin? This episode is inspired by a reader email. So I love the reader emails. I love creating episodes that resonate with you guys, that are what you want to hear. And this question that came through is a question that I've dealt with so many times in one-on-one work with clients over the past 4 years. And like most answers or most questions on this show, it's not like oh, just do that, right? It's really, there's so much more depth to considering anything when you come to do ketamine. I mean, look at all the episodes that we have, right? Like, how do you select the clinic? There's like a whole episode on that. And there's a worksheet, and there's like more listeners reaching out, asking for more questions and things like that. Or should I sit solo or with a trip guide? There's like a whole episode on that and a sheet, it's not ready yet, by the way, but we are working to get all of those free materials into one space. I'll announce when that's ready. The best place that I'll announce that will be the email list. So go to any of the links, put your email in, make sure you're on our email list, or just find my email and shoot me an email, say, hey, I want to be on the email list, because all of the free resources are going into one space rather than being sort of divided by episodes, so that you can access them all. And that'll be ready in the next, couple of weeks. I like to say that, but also I'm not the post-production team. And so I want to give my post-production team just so much love and shout out. There's like a whole slew of people that are helping make all of this possible. And I'm like, oh, that'll be quick. And they're like, No, Anna, it's not. And I say, oh, I feel so humbled and educated. Thank you. So this episode is inspired by a reader question, and I reached back out. By the way, I will never share anything on the podcast without explicit consent. So when I got this question, I said, hey, I would love to answer this into a podcast episode because I've guided so many clients through this question, and I know it's not straightforward, and I want to give you as much information as possible. And I said, hey, do you mind if I read the email? Because I know your words will resonate with the readers more than my own. And just shout out to this listener. I'm not going to name them, but they were like, yeah, share the email. So I'm going to read it right now. So the email says, subject, ketamine question, message. Hello, Anna. First of all, thank you so much for the wonderful content you share on your podcast. It was so helpful to me preparing for my ketamine infusions. I even found a great clinic that was named by one of the guests on your podcast. I was hoping I might ask you a question. I did 6 IV infusions back in March, and I was so immensely impacted in ways I did not expect. I think, like most people who go into ketamine, I was hoping to miraculously be cured of all my long-standing troubles. Of course, I knew that was unrealistic, but it didn't stop me from secretly wishing it. What I did not expect was how profoundly it was going to shift my sense of safety around being hopeful in my life, and how much it would give me a sense that I can have more control over and more of an impact on the course of my life. Hopelessness and victimhood have been very difficult concepts for me to shift. Along with that has come a really noticeable lessening in my depression and has allowed me to dive more effectively into integration work and other therapeutic modalities. My clinic recently reached out to me to check in and see how I was doing because I have not gone back for any follow-ups. I've been thinking recently that it would be really nice if I could take advantage of the upregulation and neuroplasticity that ketamine provides, as I'm trying to work through a few really difficult patterns that have followed me since childhood. But part of me feels like since I'm not really depressed anymore, it's kind of an abuse of this medication. My insurance doesn't cover the treatment, so it's not an issue of justifying my reasons to an insurance company. But I am interested in your thoughts on using the medicine intermittently as I continue to uncover deeper aspects of myself and try to break through really tough patterns, even if my depression itself feels well controlled right now. If you are able to provide your thoughts, I would greatly appreciate it. And if not, thank you again so much for all you do. Sincerely, listener. So let's just shout out this listener for being brave to come forward with a question. I love questions. Curiosity is my favorite state of being. I just said it on the show. I'm a Gemini. Curiosity rules my world. I think the worst questions are the ones that go unasked. I've had this belief since childhood. So if you have any questions, please reach out. And I want to, shout out the listener for reaching out, for being brave, for posing a question, for being brave to let me read this email. Like, we're all going to get so much out of it. I know I got a lot out of answering this question. And I think this is about where the episode picks up. So the first point, luckily I have notes on this episode, so I was able to go back and reread my notes. So what you'll begin to hear now is the original recording where the intro was blacked out. And the first point was, let's start with how soon people feel better with ketamine, immediate versus delayed results. And that's where the episode picks up, of me saying like, hey, we don't know how quickly into the medicine this particular listener saw benefits. And I've worked with clients that see immediate relief after just one session. And I've also worked with clients that don't see relief until session maybe 3 or 4. 6 sessions is the gold standard, which always leaves me really curious about what is the magic number of 6, because ever since my hypnotherapist days that I started back in 2017, I know that 6 sessions of hypnosis is the magic sauce that leads to 93% improvement. And now we have 6 sessions of ketamine leading to the, gold standard of improvement. Yes, there are studies and more research that shows for a lot of treatment-resistant depression patients, a mouthful, that 10 sessions is actually becoming becoming more normalized. But what is it about those 6 sessions? If you know, please reach out. If I'm repeating myself, have grace, because I'm doing my best to give you as much of the intro as possible before diving into the original recording. And yeah, that's where the episode picks up, as me acknowledging, like, hey, we don't know when the listener felt better, and normalizing that it might be sooner, it might be later, and diving into that. So I'm going to let Arvin cut in the original part of the episode now, and I hope you enjoy, and thank you for being here. A lot of listeners of this show are new to ketamine, and honestly, if that's you and you're anxious or just someone who likes to feel prepared, then you know that ketamine can be beautiful and it can also be overwhelming. Most clinics will not tell you this, but preparing for ketamine is what turns a confusing, chaotic trip into a grounded, life-changing experience. The ketamine preparation protocol is your go-to guide to walk you through that door with confidence. I've used this exact framework with clients since 2021 to help you feel safe, supported, and ready. And the feedback is always the same. I'm so glad I had this before my first journey. So whether you've already started ketamine or you're about to, if you're wondering, what if I do it wrong? Just don't wonder, prepare. Head to the link in the show notes and get started with the ketamine preparation protocol so that you can get the transformation that you deserve. Something that I want to speak to first that the client did not mention, and that is the point of how long it took for them to feel better with this ketamine process. Now, we know that they did a 6-pack of IV infusions, and we don't know how quickly into that process they felt better. So I want to speak to that first and foremost, because I want to normalize that sometimes you feel better after your first session. And in fact, there is a note from the 2021 review from the American Journal of Psychiatry that reported that around 70% of people with treatment-resistant depression experienced noticeable relief from ketamine treatment, often within 24 hours. So there is a population of people, and maybe you're one of them, that goes into ketamine, and after the first session, there is this noticeable change. There is a lift of the cloud. There is something that really clicks in, and you have a breakthrough. And from working with clients for the past 4 years, sometimes it happens after session 4, and sometimes it goes beyond the 6-pack that is sort of recommended. I recently worked with a client that signed up for the 6-pack. It's the gold standard. I don't know why. I've asked this question before on the show, because 6 sessions of hypnosis are also the gold standard for noticing a 93% improvement rate in whatever issue the client comes to work on. So it's always been fascinating to me, and I'm going to pose this question over and over again until someone reaches out with an answer, because I've done so much digging in on this. But why is it that 6 sessions of hypnosis and 6 sessions of ketamine are the gold standard that really change a person's life? I am assuming it has something to do with, taking 6 hours to intentionally rewire the synaptic connections in the subconscious mind that lead to profound change. And since 2023 or 2024, there was a study that showed that actually for some treatment-resistant depression, the client needs up to 10 sessions. And so I was recently working with a client that went beyond that 6-pack of infusions and had their breakthrough in session 7. So I just want to speak to that we don't know how quickly you'll feel better. And there is a lot of evidence that shows that you will. The next point that I want to speak to is this shift in sense of safety that this listener reported. And it speaks to the shift that takes people, right? Like, how is someone who has treatment-resistant depression, which, by the way, treatment-resistant depression means that they have tried 2 interventions for the adequate amount of time without success. Now, 2 interventions, we're talking about Western psychiatric medications as interventions, just so you know what we're talking about. And an adequate amount of time can sometimes be as short as 6 to 8 weeks. So when we're talking about people, for the people that I work with, have been in whatever dense state they're in, right? Depression, anxiety, PTSD, have been in that state anywhere from 2 years to about 20 something years. And when we're talking about a Western psychiatric medicine that we know is highly ineffective, there's a lot of studies on it. I'm not going to get into it. It's not the point of this episode. but look it up for yourself. And we're talking about shifting something that took, let's say, the median of that, let's say 10 years, or let's even be generous and say, okay, someone's been in a state for 5 years, and setting the expectation that that dense state, that habit, that pattern could be broken in 6 to 8 weeks. I don't see that as something that is realistic, something that is kind to offer someone. Also, when we get into the psychedelic model of healing, we are talking about what the client mentions in the letter, that about having more control and having the ability to work more effectively in integration and other therapeutic modalities. I'll get to that in a second. What I wanted to say was this element of contrast. When someone has been living in a dense mental state, right? Depression, anxiety, PTSD, these are habitual patterns, and they come with a lifestyle, we'll say. And so if someone's been in the same lifestyle and they're thinking the same thoughts, which we all do, by the way, experiencing the same emotions, which we all do, by the way, unless you take the time to intervene into your subconscious mind, 95% of your life experience is on repeat. I want to normalize that. So, what the ketamine offers is a pattern interrupt. It breaks the habit that you are perpetually in day after day. It's why ketamine is not just used for treatment resistant whatever, but also used in executive leadership, right? Because every single person, we all get into patterns. The subconscious mind is hardwired for efficiency. It likes predictability, and it is going to create that, whether it is a high achieving predictability or a despair predictability. And the ketamine comes in and it breaks that pattern immediately. And then what happens is you have the element of contrast. In this 3D reality that we live in, everything goes by contrast. So you have the contrast of being in a pit of despair, right? As this reader was saying about their depression, or rather the listener, I'm the reader reading their email. So you have the pattern of despair, and then all of a sudden there's a lightness, and now you have a contrast. And what contrast provides is this lived experience of, wow, it can be different. Because when you are looping the same reality over and over and over, there becomes this hopelessness of, can it even be any different? So immediately, that 70% of people that have that lift in their treatment resistant depression immediately, they are likely experiencing contrast, which is giving them their hope back. And so then what the ketamine is doing is that it's showing the nervous system that a different way of being is possible. The nervous system gets a break from that constant vigilance, from the despair, from the looping, from whatever that dense mental state is. And it's not something that is going to continue itself on its own, but it's showing you that something different is possible. And this is something that I say in pretty much every single first session that I do with clients, is that the ketamine is not going to solve your problems, but it's going to make you solving your problems more possible. And the example that I often give is my own experience of stopping drinking alcohol after working with psychedelics. The psychedelics did not go into the bar and make sure that I didn't drink. They did not, a year after I wasn't drinking, keep me from going into bars. But what they did was they gave me an imprint that was so visceral and so embodied and so potent that after 2 years of trying to get away from alcohol, I was able to do it after just one weekend working with psychedelics. If you don't know that story, check out the episode from last year, something that I wasn't expecting after my first ketamine experience or my first psychedelic experience. I'll link it in the show notes. It's one of your favorite episodes because it's a story, and we like stories. We learn and we go through stories. And even the email from this listener says it right there in what they shared, that they weren't expecting how profoundly it was going to shift their sense of safety around being hopeful in their life, and how much it would give them a sense that they have more control over and more impact on the course of their life. So it is something that, again, it didn't do anything for them other than give them that contrast that allowed them to dive into therapeutic modalities and make those noticeable shifts in the hopelessness and the victimhood that they had been experiencing for a long time. Now, I want to normalize that hopelessness and victimhood are also dense mental states, and they become comfortable. It is the devil that you know. And when you don't know a different state of being, when you've been looping that victimhood, that hopelessness for a long time, there becomes a comfort in that misery. And I know that is difficult to here. I don't really like saying it. However, I know from lived experience that there are times that I have felt really comfortable in my discomfort because it is a familiar discomfort. It is a predictable discomfort. And the more I get away from that, by the way, as I've been working with psychedelics for over 7 years now to shift out of dense mental states, which, by the way, I have an episode coming up with Dr. Austin Harris, who invited me to his clinic in Sherman Oaks, Neuro Relief. And we talk about my story a little bit. And I can tell you from personal lived experience of digging myself out of a deep depressive hole, and I still have episodes of depression. It's normal in my world, it's under control. Kind of like this client says, or this listener says in their email. And I can tell you that the further I get from really deep depressive holes, from suicidal ideation and things like that, that used to be really normal in my world, the more that I have to normalize and work towards feeling joy, the more that I have to titrate happiness, the more that I have to titrate lighter states of being because I have not experienced as much of that as the dense ones in my life personally. So we have enough lead up now that I can get into the client's question. Again, I keep saying client, I mean listener. Let's just weave those into the same term. So the question is, kind of justifying using ketamine when they're not really depressed anymore. And here's something that I work with a lot with clients, specifically those coming out of depressive holes. Those of us that are used to depression are used to being miserable. And what we work on a lot in my one-on-one work is lifting the floor of how much misery, like how much misery you experience, right? So basically almost making misery less tolerable, because those of us that are used to being miserable are so used to being miserable that we're like, oh, well, it's not that bad, so I'm not going to seek help until it gets really bad, right? There's a lot tied in there. There's a lot of self-worth issues. There's a lot of patterning there. There's a lot to dive in there that I'm not going to get into in this episode. However, that is something that I want to comment on is two things. One, how bad do things need to get in order to seek help? And when you're working with psychedelics in the way that I hear this listener working with, they are working with them where they're uncovering things in layers, right? What they mentioned earlier was that their hopelessness and victimhood were very difficult concepts to shift. And now there's probably some space around that. There's more lightness, there's more hope, there's less victimhood. Even if it's 1% less, guys, that is still a pattern interrupt in the subconscious mind. And I really cannot emphasize enough how valuable a 1% shift is, even if it's 1%. I cannot encourage you enough to celebrate the small wins, because the subconscious mind is hardwired for safety, efficiency, and predictability. And it's going to do its best to minimize that. So you can have, and I personally have had, a 10% increase in whatever I'm working on, right? 10% improvement. And my subconscious mind is making me try to believe that, oh, it's not that much. And so in my personal practice and what I work on with clients all the time is 1% improvement is so worth celebrating. It is as worthy of celebrating as anything else, and actually sometimes even more, because the deeper ingrained you are, the more that 1% shift, right? It's like getting the cogs of the wheel going, and then lubricating those joints that machine will be running faster and smoother. We put the most amount of effort, right, in a car to go from parked to first gear takes the most amount of effort. So if you are experiencing a 1%, 2%, 5% improvement in whatever you're working on, celebrate the heck out of that, because it's going to pay dividends in how much more better you can feel. When talking about improvement, I often give the analogy of climbing a mountain, right? If you've ever climbed a mountain, or if you can just imagine climbing a mountain, you're walking uphill and you are walking for a little or a long time, and inevitably you're going to get to an outlook, or a lookout rather. And I highly recommend, as someone who loves hiking, I highly recommend to pause, take a break, and look at the view. It's going to look different as you get higher up. And also to take that moment to celebrate the view that you just spent however long getting to. And I talk about this in the psychedelic model of healing as well. You're unpeeling a layer, you're taking time to shift something. And then there's that integration phase where you integrate whatever that change is, and it becomes your new normal. I spoke about that in an episode a while ago about shifting the subconscious mind, because when you have integrated that new way of being, then all of a sudden it is normal for you, right? Something that I say a lot is you can't control your first thought, but you can control your second, until that second thought becomes your first thought. And now it's integrated and it's normal. It is your new way of being. And something that we say in this analogy is new level, new devil, right? So you get to a new level, and this is almost like a video game analogy. You get to a new level, you have a new villain to overcome. And that's how this works. And that's why I recommend taking a moment to look at the view, to take in the changes that you've made, to celebrate that 1%. Because I said that in the episode a couple weeks ago of, as long as there is breath, there is more work to be done. And so the journey is the destination. And so, yes, use the neuroplasticity that ketamine offers to unpeel that layer, to overcome that devil at this current level, and then take a moment to take it in. And then if you're doing that, if you're using the ketamine to uptick your neuroplasticity, to unpeel the layer, to get to the next level of your healing, then the question is, why would you not do that? Why would you not take that extra boost and help? Well, a few reasons. One is, right, when you are used to being deeply depressed, you're used to large amounts of suffering. And so when the suffering that you're experiencing is less, then there's this worthiness thing of like, well, am I worthy of experiencing even less suffering? Is it okay to experience even less suffering? And that's where this question comes in oftentimes is, have I earned feeling better? Is the ketamine going to super speed something that I should be doing for myself? Now, again, someone with a history of all of these dense mental states, I can speak from personal experience that I very much used to be a white knuckle type of person. Even when I was getting away from drinking, I was white knuckling it until I got the assistance from psychedelics. And before that, I thought that if I didn't do it myself, that it didn't count. I wouldn't let myself ask for help. I wouldn't even really accept help unless I was like laid out on the floor. And even then, sometimes I would put on all of these masks of, I'm fine, it's fine, people have it worse than me, spiritual bypass, override my true feelings, bulldoze this, and not be honest with myself, and definitely not honest with the world. And I really want to highlight this because I can't speak to enough how freaking normal this is in our society. There is a quote that is living rent free in my head from Dr. Carl Hart Jr.'s book that I cannot recommend enough. Drug Use for Grownups. That's right. Drug Use for Grownups. Great book. We'll link it in the show notes. And in the book, he talks about this Puritan society that we live in. And I love how he describes it. He says, or I think he quotes someone else. Anyways, I got it from his book. do your own research. And it says that Puritanism is the haunting fear that someone somewhere may be happy, right? There is this vigilance of like, oh my God, what if I'm happy? Like, am I allowed to be happy? Have I earned it? Like all of these things that I'm constantly working on clients on, because it is so in our Puritan society. That is the foundation of what we're living in. And I love later in the book, he goes on to say that I am now telling you that you have the right to the pursuit of pleasure, just like every other adult. You don't have to justify it. You don't have to apologize for it. Feeling good is a legitimate reason. So, getting to the crux of this listener's question that they emailed in to, are boosters abusive or are they strategic? Here's the thing. I'm always advocating for ketamine to be used in a clinical setting outside of the home. I've spoken about this before. I know that there is value in just getting out of the house, especially if you're someone who has been depressed. It is already a pattern interrupt. If you only have access to at-home ketamine, it's great. It's better than nothing. However, I'm always saying that you should be doing ketamine in a clinical setting. And so, therefore, the possibility of abusing it in a clinical setting is minimized. Now, there are very, very valid concerns and very valid considerations that ketamine can be abused. It absolutely can. And if you are using it with intention, if you are using it strategically, if you are using it for a certain outcome and intermittently, then why would you not receive that help? I am absolutely pro receiving a booster of ketamine when you are using it in conjunction with getting through to that next level, when you are using it in integrity, when you are getting support around it, whether it is from a ketamine coach or from a provider that knows what they're doing, that knows how to work with the psychedelic model of healing. Not all therapists do, not all providers do. So I really recommend doing your research and finding the help from someone that knows what they're doing to help explain all this and break it down. The punchline is, even with ketamine, right? Like this listener is saying, they've felt this shift in their depression. They were able to get out of hopelessness and victimhood. And no, ketamine didn't solve all their problems, even though they were wishing it would secretly, but it's allowed them to do integration, to have these other therapeutic modalities helping them. And so they're already in this place of receiving help. And so if the ketamine is helpful, why would you not receive help for something that is already so difficult? I can speak from personal experience as someone who is a master of the subconscious mind, someone who has my own coaching, receiving coaching, someone who is working with my patterns. Guys, right now, 2025, every single day, I'm not joking, the threshold that I'm working through, the new level that I am breaking through to is so far from where I've come and so far outside of my comfort zone that yes, I am doing something to work with my subconscious repatterning every single day. And I want to normalize that, because let's talk about brushing your teeth. Okay, you did it once. Great. Do it at least twice a day. If we can normalize brushing our teeth twice a day, right? If we can normalize showering, I'm not going to go there. I know we all have different shower practices. Regularly, hopefully, I know it's different if you're depressed. I get it. However, there's all these other hygienic processes or patterns or practices that we do on a regular basis. Yet when it comes to mental hygiene, we think that someone's just going to hand us a silver bullet and it's going to fix everything. Or I'm going to go do 1 hour of this and it's going to fix everything. The reality is, you're working with the 5% against the 95%, and any help you can receive in that is actually helpful, that is safe, that is working with your other modalities, right? When I'm talking about daily practices, I'm not talking about one thing. I'm talking about such a holistic approach. If you want to hear more about that, let me know. I feel like I talk enough about myself on here, but I'm happy to let you know or to do a call with you guys and invite you into my world to let you know what it is that I do on a daily basis to help repattern my subconscious mind so that I've actually overcome suicidal ideation. And yes, part of that is working with psychedelics. Part of that is working with hypnosis, and part of that is working with other modalities that are repatterning my default mode network, again, on a daily basis. And I want to thank this listener for reaching out and really sharing their story in a way that hopefully helps you see that while ketamine can offer immediate relief, right? That 70% that have immediate relief within 24 hours, it still nonetheless is something that is unfolding. It happens in layers, and the journey is not over. The next chapter begins, right? Okay, so the hopelessness has lifted, the victimhood has lifted, and it happens in layers. And so, what is the next layer? As a ketamine coach, I'm always speaking to the power of preparation and integration. And when you are properly prepared and you are working with ketamine to integrate the experiences to actually change your life, not just to go have a light show and a fun experience, but to actually use the neuroplasticity to reformat your brain, to rework your patterns, to lift that dense state that you might be experiencing, then absolutely get help with that. And that help includes ketamine, includes someone who can help you with proper preparation and integration, and also an entire support system for yourself so that you are also empowering yourself and lifting yourself up out of these states as well. Okay, so I know the next question is going to be, well, okay, if you're pro booster, how often? That is not a size fits all answer. None of the questions are. It is really about what works for you. There are times where maybe it works to go every 3 weeks, right? To get that booster every 3 weeks. There are studies that show that the neuroplasticity from ketamine, right? It usually lasts about 72 hours. However, when you're doing that 6 pack of sessions, usually infusions, it can go in the body for longer, and so 21 days. And so then, okay, every 21 days, if you're working through something, and then feel into it. Okay, am I steady? Am I okay? Okay, I can go a little bit longer. Maybe then you go 6 weeks, maybe then you go 3 months. It's not a science. And if psychedelics are not teaching you anything else, they are teaching you how to become an expert in yourself, how to get to know yourself even better, and how to honor your truth and show up for yourself. All right. If you've stuck around this long and you've made it to the end of the episode, thanks for being on this journey with me. And I want to say too that I know that there are people out there that have been doing ketamine for a while. Maybe you've already gotten through your 6 pack of sessions and you didn't feel the relief that you had hoped for. A lot of that is because there is not proper preparation out there. And when you have the proper preparation, I've seen it so many times, it can retroactively fit your ketamine experience so that it makes more sense and you actually get more out of it, even again, retroactively. Retroactively meaning you can go through the whole experience. You didn't have the breakthrough that you had wanted, or maybe it's not as big of a breakthrough as you thought. And with the right support and the right education, you can actually have a different experience. You can change the experience that you had in the past from this present moment. If that doesn't make sense to you, I totally get it. And when you enter the psychedelic model of healing, you are getting out of the understanding that time and space is linear. If you want to know more about that, or if you're just curious, check out the ketamine preparation protocol. A lot of the topics that I covered in the episode today, I go in deeper in the ketamine preparation protocol because I know that there's not really good information out there to support you in your ketamine journey. And I want you to really make use of this time, make use of your investment with what you're paying for ketamine. But even more than that, make use of the hope investment that you have. Because as someone that has dug myself out of more depressive holes than I care to count, to be completely honest, I know that the resource of hope is something that can feel finite. And I'm here to tell you it's not. And I'm also here to tell you that there is help out there. So thank you, listener, for writing in and allowing me to share your letter and allowing me to speak to this. Hopefully, this answered your question. If not, just write me right back and we can have another episode for anything that I missed. Anyone that is interested in learning more about the work that I do with the ketamine preparation protocol and otherwise, check out the show notes. I know I mentioned a few other episodes from the show in this episode as well. I'll link those in the show notes as well. And write in. I will not share anything that you write in without your explicit consent. So don't worry about me sharing something personal on the show without your consent. And as always, guys, stay curious. Thank you for being here. And I'll see you next time on Ketamine Connections. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning into Ketamine Connections with me today. If this episode supported you, the best way to say thank you is by sharing it or leaving a review. And if you're enjoying the show and you want to connect more, I would love to see you on my newsletter. That is where I share behind the scenes insights, thoughtful guidance, and other parts of your ketamine journey. Never spam, always fun. And honestly, since getting kicked off of social media in 2024, it's where I share the real stuff. I share stories, tools, updates that I don't post anywhere else. So sign up at any of the links in the show notes and you'll be the first to know when I'm hosting live Q&A or when I'm doing other fun things that are not available anywhere else. It's the best place to hear about it, stay connected, and grow together. All right, that is all I have for today. Thank you. Stay curious, and I'll see you next time.